Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Women's Declaration International USA Convention. After gathering in 2022 in Washington, D.C. to reignite the women's liberation movement, and in San Francisco in 2023 to accelerate the movement, we have joined this weekend in Atlanta to amplify the women's liberation movement. Sorry, bear with me. Sorry. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Cheswick. Sorry. I got a little lost in my notes. All right. After speaking at both of the previous conventions, I joined the organization as chief of staff late last year. This summer, I joined the board of directors, and following the conclusion of Kara Dansky's term, I now serve as the president of Women's Declaration International USA. I found my way to radical feminism shortly after graduating college in 2019 while deprogramming from years spent in the gender identity cult. I was initially drawn to radical feminism for its critiques of gender identity ideology, but it was there that I found answers to some of the other questions I had around pornography, prostitution, surrogacy, and other things that so-called liberal feminism claims are empowering to women. Those claims never sat right with me, but it wasn't until I found radical feminism that I had the vocabulary and analysis I needed to articulate my views on those matters. I am especially interested in connecting older and younger feminists so that the generations may benefit from each other's knowledge, skills, and ideas. I will speak on 2 panels at this convention, both on Sunday morning. The first at 9 is titled Women Across Generations Discuss Women's Liberation. This panel will be facilitated by Kara Dansky and features Marian Rutigliano, Lorraine Nolan, Irene Lawrence, Catherine Kinney, and myself as panelists. Join us as women across 4 generations learn from each other and discuss how we can best work together to amplify the women's liberation movement. The second panel at 10 features the women of WDI USA's Desisted and Detransitioned Women's Caucus, which I currently facilitate. These women include Fern Lopez, who is here with us, Celine Colum, who will appear via Zoom, and myself. Our aim is to advocate for women and girls who formerly believed themselves to have a so-called gender identity and to amplify their stories in the hope that doing so will contribute to the dismantling of gender identity ideology. Join us as we discuss what the caucus has accomplished since launching earlier this year and what insights desisted and detransitioned women can bring to the women's liberation movement. Sisters, I am thrilled to spend this weekend with you as we amplify the women's liberation movement.
Hello. Is this working? Okay, good. My name is Carla Mantilla, and I am relatively new on the board of WDI. I'm just going to tell you a little bit how I came to radical feminism. It began in the mid-1980s when I started volunteering at a battered women's shelter. I began to see through that experience that battering was actually part of a larger pattern of oppression of women by men. Through that work, I began to see that it was male violence, not as random individual acts of mentally ill people or disturbed people, and by people I mean men, but as part of the pattern that of systematic male violence that results in the subordination of women. Subsequently, I joined the Collective of Off Our Backs, a radical feminist publication, of which I was a member from 1993 until it ceased publication in 2008. Off Our Backs began in 1970 and lasted for 38 years. If you're interested, its archives are online in various places, so they're worth a read. After Off Our Backs, I worked as the managing editor at an academic women's studies journal for too long, which led me to see up close how backlash has permeated what passes as feminism and progressivism these days. Like so many women have experienced, I was unable to be open about my radical feminist and gender critical views if I needed to keep my job, which I definitely did. Now, however, I am newly retired. And I am able to be open about radical feminism and the very real threat that transgenderism poses to women's rights and to women's safety. I'm very pleased to be on the board of WDI USA, working with an organization that, in contrast to academic women's studies, is actually working to further women's liberation. Oh, and I forgot, I'm going to be speaking at a session tomorrow, talking about how the gay movement has led to transgender ideology at 1 p.m. Go ahead, Lorraine. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine Nolan. I've been on the board of directors since about 2021. I also facilitate the Black Women's Caucus. Though you might remember the statement that we made, the Black Women's Statement Against Gender Ideology, that unexpectedly went viral. We did not expect that at all, but I'm glad that it did, because that, the perspective, obviously people wanted it. How did I come to radical feminism? Some of you may know my background. I grew up in a fairly strict, and I have to say oppressive, Pentecostal background. Women were not allowed to wear pants. We weren't allowed to wear makeup, and even the way you wore your hair, it was just really extremely difficult, and I began to question a lot of things. Also, growing up as a young Black woman in the United States, in the Black collective, we're often taught that, it's all about race. We don't have any problems as women, and that's a flat out lie. So again, I try to center Black women as much as possible, because that's something that's also, we're forgotten pretty much. With that said, we're going to have a panel on Black femicide with Rosalind Page, who's one of the co-founders of the Black Femicide Prevention Project. I don't see her here just yet, but I'm really excited about that. Is she? Okay. Also, I'm really excited about being on Elizabeth's intergenerational panel and really learning from especially women of the younger generation, because I really admire them, and I think that they're probably going through a lot more than my generation did. So I'm really interested in learning from all of you. Let's see, I think that's it for me.
Good evening. My name is Irene Lawrence. I am the board secretary for WDI USA, and I am from and I live in North Carolina, and I am so glad to have this year's convention in the South. Yeah. I came to radical feminism primarily via my involvement in criminal justice reform and prison reentry in my professional life. In this arena, issues of race and sex often get merged in troubling and nonsensical ways. And I've often been horrified but not really surprised to see many women advocates in that movement, primarily siding with men's feelings over the safety of female inmates. In my personal life, I've been pretty privileged, but I was always very aware of the anger and violence that kind of lurked in the background if I ever were to let my nice girl persona slip. The misogyny that I was raised with was no less terrifying for being covert and steeped in religious piety. And the men who I got involved with who had the best public reputations were usually the most violent in private. Fast forward to today, as a fairly newly peaked TERF, I had to come to terms with how angry I was about how much I had constrained myself to be acceptable to men. I didn't have any female role models for how to channel anger. From my friendships with TERFs, I feel like I've been able to learn defiance and fearlessness, and those do not come naturally to me, but I couldn't do this activism without that. I think anger is really necessary, but it's not sustaining. For me, as I'm sure for many of you, navigating gender ideology has been, it is a constant fight to maintain sanity and not be consumed by darkness. I feel like as my knowledge of radical feminist theories and principles has grown, I've learned to operate a little bit less out of anger, hopefully, and more out of a positive vision of what future generations of women's lives can look like. I've also learned to love women more than I'm afraid of men, and that's been much more sustainable than operating out of anger or trauma. And that's, I don't just love like women as a political category, I really love women as complex humans. And that's been, and especially many of the women, yeah, I don't know where to go with that. I really am grateful to many of you, like in this room, who have helped me get to a place where I can speak publicly about things that I might be hated for. So all that said, I'm truly honored to serve this organization and this movement.
Welcome. I'm Lauren Levy. Can you hear me? Is this better? Yes. Okay, thanks. I want you to know that there's no place on earth I'd rather be this weekend. If you're a woman who cares about women as a sex class, this is the place to be. I first joined the predecessor of the WDI USA board right after the declaration was launched in 2019. Currently, I coordinate the state legislative advocacy team, and I also serve as the coordinator of the Lesbian Caucus, which I created in 2022. Our first action was to write the Lesbian Bill of Rights, which you have in your folders. So that document has now been adopted by other radical feminist lesbian organizations in other countries, including Germany, New Zealand, Australia, Norway, and Italy. And I created a network of those organizations called Lesbian Bill of Rights International, or LBORI. LBORI has collectively authored articles on issues affecting lesbians globally from a radical feminist perspective. And you can find those articles on the WDI USA website. The Lesbian Caucus also runs a lesbian coming out group for any woman who has recently become aware that she's a lesbian, or wondering if she might be a lesbian, or even just wishing she was a lesbian. Contact info@womensdeclaration-usa.com for more information. I took my first steps toward radical feminism in 1965 when I arrived at Bennington College as a freshman. Bennington was tiny, only 300 plus students. It was all women, and we all lived on campus, pretty much. We all knew each other, of course. We were a community of sisters. A pressing social issue at the time was that abortion was criminalized. So we did two things collectively. First, we raised the funds more than once for any student, any sister student, right, who needed an abortion to get one that was medically safe. And second, we marched and demonstrated for the right to abortion on demand. Vermont became the fourth state to decriminalize abortion before the Roe v. Wade ruling decriminalized it nationally, and I'm pretty sure we helped make that happen. So we successfully made safe abortions available to each other, and in the process we learned that sisterhood is powerful. And also that sisterhood flourishes when women are eating and sleeping and talking together outside the presence of men. We had the most amazing conversations. They went on all night, every night. I didn't even want to sleep because I didn't want to miss anyone's fresh analysis of patriarchy. And I wasn't the only one in that women-only residential community who thrived in that environment. In 1965, Andrea Dworkin was also a student at Bennington College. It was an environment that nurtured collective activism. So now, in 2024, here we are at this beautiful hotel in Atlanta. Women are talking together in person, eating together, living together, all without men being present. This time around, we already know what the issues are, and we already know something about radical feminist analysis. This is the place, and this is the time. Don't worry about getting enough sleep this weekend. We've got work to do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine. I first became involved with WDI USA pretty soon after the US chapter opened, around 2020, and I joined the board in 2022. And since then, I've done a lot of different stuff, as we all have. If you didn't know already, we are a 100% volunteer-run organization. None of us are paid for any of this, and if you would like to help make things like this happen, submit an application on our website. The main thing, I'll keep it short, but the main thing I want to mention is you may already have heard that I'm interviewing women this weekend. If you're interested in being interviewed, please come and find me at some point in the breaks, after meals. We can do it video, audio only, first name only, no name at all, up to you. My goal here is to inspire more women to get involved in the movement and take action. So come find me. And throughout the convention, I'll also be on the intergenerational panel, and I'll also be facilitating a couple breakout discussions on one for all same-sex attracted women, one for young women, and then after tonight's panel, I'll be facilitating a networking session to help us all get to know each other a little bit better. All right, thank you.